This program was recorded with a live audience. Please forgive the occasional sound fluctuations.
In this live lecture, Dr. Wayne W. Dyer explores intention as an all-pervading force in the universe that allows the act of creation to take place. Intention, he explains, is not something you do, but an energy you're a part of. Not only do you emanate from the field of intention, but if you align yourself to it, your desires become fulfilled and you find yourself at peace. Healing, manifesting your desires, and creating miracles are genuine possibilities, and indeed probabilities, when you listen to Dr. Dyer and connect to the power of intention.
This seminar is called The Power of Intention. It's also what I've spent the last year or so of my life working on. Some of you have heard me speak about it. Generally, when we think of the word intention, we have a tendency to place a definition on it that involves our own ego. If I have an intention to do something, it means that I have a very strong will, and nothing is going to stop me, and nothing's going to get in the way. And this word intention very often means something like a pit bull, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these pit bulls who get a hold of a tire, and you can take the tire and you can do this to the pit bull and the thing will never let go. It gets that grip, that iron grip on it. And so I intend to make a certain amount of money. I intend to have a certain job. I intend to meet the right person, the person of my dreams. I intend to heal myself of this disease. I intend to be happy. Any number of these kinds of statements that we refer to, and we use the word intention. And I'd like you to, for the remainder of this program, I'd like you to really think in terms of shifting that definition of intention. And rather than thinking of it as something that you do, I'd like you to try to put your attention on an idea that says that intention is not something that has anything to do with my ego at all. That intention is a field of energy in the universe. And this field of energy is very powerful, and everything that shows up here in this world of the material that we're all trapped in was intended here from something. Now, when I think and speak about intention, and we'll be speaking about it throughout all of these days, I'm going to be looking at intention that way. And the problem that we have with the other definition of intention is that we get ourselves involved in it so strongly that we label ourselves as successes or failures dependent upon whether or not we're able to fulfill these things that we intend to create. And I have come to a place at this time in my life that I have an awareness that that God builds all the bridges, and that God delivers all the speeches, and that God writes all the books, and that God creates all of the means for anything that is going to come into this world, including ourselves. And that when we get our egos out of it, and our egos are really just ideas that we carry around about who we are. And this ego has an idea that says that who I am is based upon the idea of what I have, or what I do, or what other people think of me. And this ego part of us is also something that identifies ourselves on the basis of being separate from each other. So if you believe that you're separate from everybody else in this room, or everybody else in your life, if you believe that, then it's important for you to believe that you are in competition with that person, and that what it is that you would like to get, they might be going after it and getting it before you do. And so you find yourself very often with this ego belief that I am my stuff, I am my accomplishments, I am my reputation, and I am separate. And that key word is separate. I am separate from everybody else. Places an enormous amount of pressure on us to be in a state of competition with each other. It also makes us adversaries. Watching the political season, whenever it comes upon us, is always intriguing to me. If I ever ran for political office, I'd like to stand up in front of a group of people with 9 other people who are all trying to get the same nomination as I am and announce that I have no opponents, that I'm not running against anyone, that the person that is in the White House right now is not someone that I am running against. I'm not running against anybody else's record. I always loved Mother Teresa's observation when they asked her in 1967, will you march for us against the war in Vietnam? And she refused. She said, I will never march against the war. She said, but when you have a march for peace, I'll be there. And there's a big difference between marching against something or being what you're for. And wouldn't you just love to hear the people who are running for office who represent us saying, this is what I'm for. This is what I believe in. This is what I intend to create. This is what I see as my platform. And I'm not running against anyone or anybody else's accomplishments or otherwise. If you want to know about what they've done, ask them. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. So the concept even of having a debate in politics, to me, makes no sense. Because you're not running against someone else, you're running for this office and to be able to do these kinds of things when you are in office. So putting our attention on what we are for and also on being connected to each other is a big part of this field of intention. Also, I think that the idea that our ego says that I am separate from what I would like to attract into my life is a very important variable here. See, if there's no place that our source is not, if there's no place that God is not, then God has to be in me. And if there's no place that God is not, God also has to be in everything that I perceive to be missing from my life. In some way, invisible though it may be, I am connected already to everything that is missing in my life, so that really being able to be in this field of intention that I'm speaking about is one in which you do not see yourself as disconnected from anything or anyone. It's a place where you have an awareness that I have within me an invisible power that connects me to everything that exists in this universe, not only exists now, but ever has existed and ever will exist. And that every single human being on this planet and in this universe in some way shares this field of intention with me. We were all intended here from a source. And this will become clearer as you listen on. The other thing that I think this ego says is that I am separate from God, so that we all show up here as part of a divine, perfect state of well-being. We all show up here from that. And then we take on these things called egos. I am what I have. I am my stuff. I have more stuff than you have. I am smarter than you. I have more money. I am more this, that, and the other thing. And we separate ourselves from this state of well-being that we all emanated from and take on these things called egos. And that's when we begin to introduce into our lives non-well-being. Imagine a source that creates everything, that is a source of well-being, creating disease. Imagine a source that is the creator of everything, creating something called unhappiness, creating something called fear, creating something called depression or anxiety. This is a source from which all things emanate, and it is a source of well-being. And it's only when we separate ourselves from this source that these things that we call problems and struggles and difficulties and all of the stuff that doesn't show up in our life the way we would like to have it begins to become a part of our lives. And the power of intention is the power of being able to reconnect ourselves to this source energy from which everything emanates. And in this program, you're going to hear a lot about source energy. You're going to hear a lot about what this source energy looks like. I'm going to have you imagine a set of binoculars in which you could magically turn them on this field of intention and adjust them in such a way so that you could see this field of energy that you originated from. I'm going to ask you to listen to what that field of energy sounds like, if it could talk to you, the source from which you originated. I'm going to ask you to begin to imagine what it feels like to be in vibrational harmony, in concert with, in harmony with that field of energy that originates everything. To return to that, where there's no ego, where there's no mine and yours. The Native Americans used to say that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. A branch that knows that it's connected to every other branch would be a very foolish branch if it decided to go to war against that other branch, wouldn't it? And all of us are branches on a tree called humanity. I don't know about you, but I watch, and the older I get, the older my body gets. So I'm infinitely young. I am perplexed at what I see on the news every night. I'm perplexed by our history. I taught history for years in a high school. That our history is nothing more than the history of all of the people that we were hating. You know, this talk that I'm giving here right now, if I were to give this talk in 1763, right here on this piece of land, you would all be told the people that you're obliged to hate are all the people who are French. Because there was a French and Indian war going on, and the people who lived over here were told that your patriotic duty is to hate anything French. If you went 20 years later, you were allowed to like the French. They were welcome now. So you didn't have to hate them anymore. But now you had to turn all of your hatred that we will decide is who you're supposed to hate in the name of whoever tells us who we're supposed to hate toward the English. And so if you watched the Patriot, Mel Gibson's movie, you can see how much hatred there was, and the people locking each other into churches and closing the doors and setting them on fire. This kind of behavior toward each other, it's very perplexing to me. And then if you go ahead about another half a century or so later, you were told that if you lived in the South, you were supposed to hate everybody that was in the North. And if you lived in the North, you were supposed to hate everybody that was in the South. And if you had brothers that were living there, it was your obligation to go down there and shoot at them and kill them. So we had more people who we were supposed to hate. And then that got sort of resolved, and it was okay to like the English, and it was okay now we can like the French. And yes, we can now, we don't have to kill each other. I mean, if you look at the films of movies like Gettysburg, I stood there at that battlefield and watched just a reenactment of what took place there. Thousands of men lining up on this end of the field, and thousands more lining up on the other end of the field, and then they just charge at each other because they're told to do this, and the people who have the most people standing at the end of the day on the field are declared the winners over a field. And then they all leave the field and go someplace else and do the same thing over and over again. Shooting, I mean, it isn't like they're throwing puffballs at each other. They're killing each other. All of these people who are connected to each other. And then you go ahead and it's now okay to love people in the North and South again. That's fine. So now 30 years later, you're supposed to hate the Spanish. We're at war with Spain, the Spanish-American War in 1898. So now anything Spanish you have to hate. So now you're told who to hate again. And we're going over there trying to kill anybody that is Spanish. And North and South is united, and you can like the English. Until 20 years later, we're told that our obligation is to hate the Germans. And now you can like the people from Spain, and you can like the French. That's okay. So here we go back, and we fight again and kill and kill and kill in the hundreds of thousands. The way that we evaluate our levels of civilization is based upon how good we are at killing. and how many people we can kill until we invent terms like megadeath, where we can now actually figure out ways to kill each other because of who we hate by sitting in air-conditioned rooms and just pushing buttons on almost like a computer game. In fact, September 11th, the whole thing that went down in 2001, so many young people, young teenagers, were watching this take place on television, and they didn't even react to it because they thought it was a video game and that those towers would come back up again in the next frame. So now we hate all the Germans, and then 20 years or so later, we add the Japanese. So now we have the Japanese to hate and the Germans to hate, and it's our obligation to hate these people and their obligation to hate us. And then we go forward into my lifetime, and we had to hate the communists. I used to ask a question in my audiences when I was lecturing, during the Cold War, is there anybody in this audience that hates somebody in Russia? And I never had a hand go up. And the thousands of people I asked, not once did a hand ever go up. No, and we found out that we had spent something like 20 or 30% of our gross national product over a long period of time, almost 2 decades, in developing weapons aimed at this country to annihilate them, and they were doing the same thing, and nobody hated anybody. You couldn't find anybody that was mad at anybody. They just were told that this is who we're supposed to hate. And then we added, of course, the North Koreans, and after that, in Vietnam, we hated the Cong. We were told to hate the Viet Cong. We could like the people in the South. It's hard to know whether people in the South part of Vietnam or the people in the North part of Vietnam were, we didn't know who the good guys were, who we were supposed to hate. And then we moved into the 70s when we began to hate all of the people in Iran, all the Iranians. Remember when they had all of the hostages and so on? These were the people we were told to hate. And then it became the Taliban. We're supposed to hate all of those people. And then the Iraqis, and on and on and on and on and on and on. It goes through all of our history books and through the whole history of humanity and everything that we study. We still haven't got it, that the enemy isn't who we hate. The enemy is hatred itself. That we haven't really locked into that consciousness, that we didn't emanate from a field of energy that has anything to do with hatred. We emanated from a field of energy that allows everything to come from a field of love. And we took on these things called hatred, and it became our lives. And we do it, not only do we do it politically, we do it in our own lives as well. We do it everywhere. And yet the greatest spiritual teachers, the ones who represent this thing called source energy, all tell us about forgiveness, about kindness, about love, about, you did not come from that field. Every problem that you have comes from some way you have separated yourselves from source energy, from this field of intention. And when I was researching this and coming up with how I wanted to talk about it and to write an entire book about it, I sat down about a year ago with a pad of paper, actually about 50 pads of paper, and a ballpoint pen. And I knew I was going to write about intention because I came across 2 quotations that I want to share with you here in the opening of this program. And these 2 quotations, observations, I feel like everything that comes into my life is energy. Einstein said, nothing happens until something moves. Everything is energy, everything. Every thought that we have has energy to it. And I'll be talking more about that a little bit later, about how we can change the energy of our lives, even in our relationships and in our homes, and even seeing money as just another form of energy that we can attract into our lives or not attract into our lives. And the right people, it's all something that once you know you're connected to this field of intention, once you know this and are so deeply connected to it, nothing can stop you. That's what intention is. And it has nothing to do with your ego whatsoever. And almost everything that I've written in the last 10 or 15 years have come from a place that I learned in going through my own recovery from addictions in my life. There's a simple phrase that says, let go and let God. And it really identifies what I'm speaking about here. It's like letting go, surrendering, reconnecting yourself to this energy field from which we all originate. And I'm calling this energy field, I'm just going to call it intention. this field of intention from which all things are intended here. And when I came across this quote, just like when I wrote some of my earlier books and produced some of my earlier tapes and so on, it's like someone hands me something, or someone gives me a book to read, or someone sends me something in the mail. And rather than treating it as just another thing that's arriving and one more thing for me to look at, I treat it as energy. This is energy that has come into my life. Not always something that I have to act upon in a certain way at a certain time and put pressure on myself. And when you begin to look at everything that shows up in your life as energy coming into your life. And these two quotes came into my life, and I knew that I would write an entire book about it and produce a public television show based upon these ideas. The first is from a man, his name is Carlos Castaneda. And Carlos Castaneda was one of the great, powerful teachers in my life. And I was reading his very last book. They say he died a few years ago. It was even in the newspapers, on the front page of the newspapers, that he had died. But I've never been totally convinced. I haven't. This was a man who was pretty much ego-free in his life. I know because his publisher was the same publisher that I had for many years of my books, and my editor was his editor. And he told me a story once about how Castaneda would receive his royalties that were due him. And I don't know if you've ever looked at one of Castaneda's books, The Power of Silence, The Fire from Within. The Active Side of Infinity is the book I'm referring to here. But you never see a picture of him. You can see how far I have to go. I got my face plastered on everything I ever did. And if the picture doesn't look quite right, I want to make sure that I look good in this. So my editor would receive, at HarperCollins, would receive a telephone call. And he would be told to put the royalties that were due him into a paper bag, brown paper bag, and to be put into a phone booth in New York City. And then someone would then pick that up so that he kept his ego totally, completely out of it whatsoever. No one ever saw or talked to him and so on. And he got it from his teacher, who was a Nagual named Don Juan Matus, and his teacher, who was a man called the Nagual Julian. This word Nagual is another word for sorcerer. Not sorcerer in the sense of incantations and booga booga and using hocus pocus and so on, but sorcerer in the true sense of what I'm speaking about here, meaning of the source. So that our objective in the power of intention and getting the power of intention is to return to our source. Not only to return to our source, but to live from our source at source energy as often and as frequently as we can. And any time we find ourselves depressed, down, sad, not feeling good in any way, or not even having what we want show up in our life, recognizing at that moment, I'm disconnected from intention. I'm disconnected from my source. And I want to return to my source. And when I return to my source, I will regain the power of my source. And this program is about how to specifically return to your source. And this is what Castaneda said in the Active Side of Infinity. In the universe, there is an unmeasurable, indescribable force which those who live of the source, that is, sorcerers, call intention. And I had never heard intention used that way before. In the universe, there is an unmeasurable, indescribable force which those who live of the source call intention. And that absolutely everything that exists in the entire cosmos is attached to intent by a connecting link. You can never be separate from your source. Sorcerers, those who live of the source, these Naguals, these people who we call enlightened masters or self-actualizers or whatever, people who are living at the highest levels of energy, sorcerers are not only concerned with understanding and explaining this connecting link, but they are especially concerned with cleansing it of the numbing effects brought about by the concerns of living at ordinary levels of consciousness. That quotation I had typed up, laminated, carried it with me wherever I went for about a year and a half, until the day came on December the 7th last year that I knew it was time to write about it. And I sat down to write about it without an outline, not knowing at all what chapter 2 was going to be. I just decided to start out with chapter 1 about a new look at intention. And I connected to my source, allowed it to flow through me. And chapter 2 turned into chapter 3, turned into chapter 4. And all of it flowed as blissfully and peacefully and joyfully and dramatically. In fact, I would just watch it unfold. And I hand wrote 569 pages. And there were times when I would write, I would be so inspired in spirit, connected to source. I would be so inspired that I would forget to number the pages. I don't know if you've ever had an experience of writing for 7 and 8 hours and having the pages just fly and just throwing them down because you didn't want to stop to put a number, and then the next morning try to put it all together when there's maybe 70 pages that you don't have any numbering system for. But that's what happened as you connect to source. So that quotation that I just gave you is something to really look at. Because you're breathing, because you're listening right now, because you're here in this room, you have to be connected to source. So the question isn't, am I or am I not connected to source? The question is, how dirty is the link? How corroded is the link? How much do I believe that I am connected to this field of energy? And how frequently do I allow myself to go back to it and reconnect to it? And how often do I deny it and take on something called ego consciousness? So that was the first quotation, the one of Castaneda. And what he said there about sorcerers are not only concerned with understanding and explaining this connecting link, which is wonderful, and hopefully I'll be able to do that here in this program, but they're especially concerned with the numbing effects brought about by living at ordinary levels of consciousness. That is, instead of living out the greatness that you signed up for to become, the genius that you showed up here from this field of energy to become, instead of that, you've taken on a willingness to be ordinary, average, a willingness to let yourself get sick, a willingness to become addicted to substances, a willingness to be victimized in relationships, a willingness to not have abundance in your life, to attract scarcity, and to believe in it, even though the source from which everything emanates is endlessly abundant. You signed up for scarcity in some way or another, or an absence of love. And it's like, that's what is meant by the numbing effects of living your life the way someone else programmed you to be. I wrote a book a few years ago called 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace. And one of those 10 secrets is don't die with your music still in you. You know, you showed up here. Whether you consciously did it or not, you still showed up here from this field of intention. And there's music that you're supposed to be playing. And when you don't play it, the numbing effects take over. And the numbing effects are not feeling good, not feeling happy, not feeling joyful, not feeling bliss, not feeling abundant, not feeling loved, not feeling cared for, and feeling as if you're a victim. And the answer to it all, it seems to me, that Castaneda was suggesting there, is to figure out a way to return to your source, to reconnect, to become a connector. The other quote that I typed up and carried with me and put into the opening chapter of this book was from a man who received the Nobel Prize in Stockholm, Sweden, for his work on the atom. And he was considered to be the greatest scientific mind of his time. His name was Max Planck. Max Planck, P-L-A-N-C-K. And he went to Stockholm, and he took the microphone in front of the world's ears, and this is what he said as he received the prize for the work that he did on the atom and all of that brilliant, hardcore scientific stuff that he was associated with, along with Albert Einstein and David Bohm and Niels Bohr and so on. He said, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you, as the result of my research about atoms, this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. It is the source of all matter. And you listening, you here in this room, all of us, are made up of particles that we call matter. And here's a metaphysician, Carlos Castaneda, and a scientific, brilliant mind, both saying the same thing, that we all emanate here from a field, and that field has no particles in it. So the question becomes, what is this field? Where is this field? And how do I get there? How do I get to this field? And one of the quotes that I really loved was also from David Bohm. This is the kind of stuff I was reading, by the way, that just came to me as I wrote The Power of Intention. It's called Wholeness and the Implicate Order. It's not going to be on the New York Times bestseller list any day soon. But one of the things that Bohm suggested is that all ordering, influence, and information is present in an invisible domain or a higher reality and can be called upon in times of need. And where is this field? Where would you find it? There's no place that it is not. You are connected to it at all times in your life. And it has no particles. It has no form. A little bit later on, I'm going to talk to you in a way about where we all originated and how to get back to that without having to die. I remember Castaneda suggesting that we're born into a house that has 1,000 rooms, but we enter one room. And the only way we know how to get into this one room in this mansion that has 1,000 rooms in it is to be born, to be conceived and born. The door opens, and the door slams behind us, and we're in this room, and he called this room the room of daily awareness. And this is all of the stuff that we've come to believe is who we are and what we're capable of, what we can do, what we can't do, all of our limitations, and how fast I can run and how much money I can make and how beautiful I am, and all of this, whatever it is, all of that is in this room of daily awareness. And the only way we know how to escape from the room of daily awareness is to die. So we get stuck in this room, and we can't find our way out of the room until we die. And Castaneda's teacher said to him, if you stay with me, I will teach you how to get out of the room of daily awareness and explore the other 999 rooms that are yours to explore without having to die. You can enter into other dimensions and other realities and enter into fields of energy that you've never even dreamt about without having to die. And then he said, and if you really stay and are really committed to it, I can teach you how to get out of the house altogether without having to die. You can look at it from a totally different and a new perspective. So that's sort of the thing that I would like to be able to provide for you. I've certainly worked on it in my own life. When people ask me about this thing called intention, I go back to being a little boy in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit. My mother had 3 boys. I was the youngest. I was born in 1940. My brothers were born in 38 and 36. My father had left, and she had these 3 boys, and she worked as a candy girl over at a place called Kresge's, 5 and 10 cent store. And in order to get to that store, she would sometimes take all 3 of us on the streetcar. And Jefferson Avenue on the east side of Detroit had these rails going right down the center of the street. And there would be these trolleys that you would catch. You would stand on the side and you'd get on. My mother would get on with her 3 boys. I was 2, my brother was 3, my next oldest brother was 4. So all of us, and we were going to a place called Waterworks Park. I'm telling you, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 2 years old. And I remember looking up, sitting on the bench, and looking up at this thing that we call a trolley strap. It was a strap that came out of the ceiling, and that if you could stand up and you were tall enough, you could hold on and keep yourself from falling. But I was so little and so young that that looked like it was 3 miles away, that I couldn't get myself to that trolley strap. And I use that as a metaphor today because I think of intention, the field of intention, as like a trolley. And the trolley has straps hanging down. But you can't get a hold of the trolley strap just by standing up. You're 2 years old, just like I was. So the only way that you can get a hold of this trolley strap 3 feet or so above your head, no matter how high you can jump, you can't get a hold of this thing because it always stays 3 feet above your head. And that trolley strap represents your connection to intention. And the only way you can get up to it is to leave your body. You have to leave this physical world of no particles that has the matrix of all matter in it and connect to it by some invisible way of getting a hold of it in your mind. And then once you have a hold on this trolley strap, the trolley, this field of intention, takes you wherever you're supposed to go. And you just have to hang on to the trolley. Now the trolley is going to stop, and it's going to pick up all kinds of people. And some of them are going to get on, and they're going to go for the whole ride, your whole life. And some of them are going to get on and only be there for a short time, and then some of them will get off, and some of them are going to get on, and then they're going to get off, and then you're going to keep going, they're going to get on again. Because there are people in your life just like that. And the thing stops exactly where it's supposed to, and it picks up exactly who it's supposed to pick up. And when people come to me and say, oh, if I only wouldn't have done so-and-so, and if I wouldn't have met that guy that I was married to for 3 years, and I had, the only good thing that happened is that we had these 3 children, but the rest of it, he was no good. And then he just keeps coming back. He's like like a bad penny, like a turd that won't flush. It just keeps showing up. And you think that, how could any of this be happening? As long as you have your hand on the trolley strap, whoever it's supposed to pick up and whoever it's supposed to drop off, and however long they're supposed to stay, all of this is all a part of the perfection of you staying connected to this trolley strap. Think of yourself as having the capacity to be able to do just that, to be able to get a hold of this thing called the trolley strap and allow it, this field of intention, and everybody that gets on. Instead of saying, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Instead of that, you just look and you welcome them. And everybody that shows up exactly on time. And when you're connected to intention, they're all there for your best interest. Everything and everyone is there for your best interest. Even the stuff and the things and the people who seem to be victimizers and seem to be they shouldn't be there, and if only this wouldn't have happened, you disconnect yourself from this idea that there are people who showed up in your life who shouldn't have showed up, who didn't belong, who weren't in the right place at the right time. This is a universe that is organized by a source energy that creates worlds. It doesn't make any mistakes. The people that show up in your life, even the ones that are the toughest ones for you to understand, all showed up exactly on time, as did you. And when you're connected to intention, you begin to see that this thing now stops only at places that are destined for your absolute best interest. You have to be able to make that shift. One of the things that we want to learn in this field of intention and connecting to intention is to merge our individual thoughts with what is called the universal mind, this matrix of all matter that Max Planck described. You want to merge yourself with that. And I'll be talking much more about that later on. But our individual thoughts, every thought that you have, creates a prototype in the universal mind of intention, a prototype. You and the power of intention are never separate. So that when you form a thought within you that's in harmony with or commensurate with spirit, you form what is called a spiritual prototype that connects you to intention. You get connected to this thing called intention. And this sets into motion the manifestation of all of your desires. One of the quotations that Einstein had, he said, all I want to do, I'm paraphrasing here, all I want to do is learn to think like God thinks, or to think the thoughts of God. All the rest is details. And that really is a very powerful idea, to understand that this field of energy from which we all show up thinks a certain way, looks a certain way, feels a certain way. And when you're thinking and feeling and acting in those ways, as it says in the New Testament, with God, all things are possible. Now you tell me what that leaves out. All things are possible. I've got 3 suggestions for you just to think about, and these again are taken from The Power of Intention. Whenever you feel lost or out of sorts or in a sour mood, do what I do, which is to visualize the trolley strap hanging down from the field of intention, 3 or 4 feet above your head. And imagine yourself just floating up and allowing this trolley to carry you to your built-in intention. This is a tool for implementing something called surrender in your life, where you surrender to this source. And I just say the words intention, and I just see the trolley strap hanging down, and I just float up to it. I find myself so much more at ease and in a state of well-being, which is the source from which we all came, a field of well-being. And you can do this virtually at any time in your life. You can even do it in the midst of an argument with someone. Or you can do it when you're feeling depressed at any given moment. You can just stop yourself and say, trolley strap. Float up, get a hold of it, and allow it, this source, to take you where you were intended to go. And allow you to have the comfort and the joy and the peace of this source energy with you rather than fighting it. So that's one of the suggestions. The other thing is to say the word intent or intention out loud and repeat it, especially when you're in a state of anxiety or when all around you seems to have conspired to keep you from your mission. This is a reminder to be peaceful as often and frequently as you can. And finally, I suggest that you copy this ancient Hasidic saying and carry it with you. It's a reminder of the power of intention and how it can work for you in every way, every day. I love this. When you walk across the fields with your mind pure and holy, then from all the stones and all growing things and all animals, the sparks of their soul come out and cling to you, and then they are purified and become a holy fire in you. That is so stunning to me, that when you are in a holy place, in a holy relationship with your source, everything conspires to work with you, everything, including the stones and the vegetation and the animals and everyone you meet. You start to create allies. And a little bit later on in this program, I'm going to be talking about the impact that you will have on others when you are connected to Source, and the impact that you have on others when you're disconnected from Source, and how much more pleasant it is to be around people who are living at Source energy. Now, the people who are always connected to intention are those that we revere as great spiritual masters, like a Jesus. We use the term Lord, Lord Krishna, Lord Jesus. Patanjali described them this way. He said, when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed toward others and yourself, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence, will cease to feel fear, and will cooperate with you. That's what that Hasidic saying I just read to you is like. I was asked the question in an interview just recently in Australia, what is your mission? And I said, without hesitating, God realization. God realization. A great saint in India named Swami Paramananda said, self-realization or God realization means that we have been consciously connected with our source of being. Once we have made this connection, then nothing can go wrong. And I remember Nisargadatta, the great teacher in India, saying, when he was asked a question about someone who had a problem, and they confronted him back and said to him, how can you be so smug when so many bad things are going on in your world and in your life? And he said, ma'am, in my world, nothing ever goes wrong. And we look at that and we say, well, what kind of nonsense is that? Nothing ever goes wrong. But when you're at God realization or at connected to Source all the time. So yes, my objective for myself is to be there in this body that I'm in, to be at that place where I'm at God realization. I assure you I've got long ways to travel to get there, especially having 8 kids. I always notice that all of the great saints never had any children. I always think, well, if Buddha, if you had to take, 5 kids with you on a flight, or to go on a vacation with them all in the car screaming at you, I don't know. So, I think God realization is our destiny, and that we can have it while we're embodied. Perhaps that's what the human journey is about, is to connect to it. If you could take a wave on the ocean, and you can identify the wave, and you can see that it has a certain size and a certain speed and a certain individuality and all kinds of things about that wave that we can describe. But if you ask, what is its essence? What is it? You'd say it's the ocean. And what is the ocean? The ocean is its source, And that's sort of like us. We can identify ourselves by our size and by our speed and by all of these physical things that have appearances, but we forget that that's not our essence. Our essence is spirit. And if we could just remember our essence, then we could appreciate being a wave, and all that it means to be a wave. Whereas, imagine a wave on the ocean saying, I don't want to do it this way. I don't want to flow this way. I want to go that way. And and I don't like the wave next to me. And that wave is bigger than this wave. And it's not fair. And how come they got more chances at being a wave than I did? And they've got surfers on them and I don't have any surfers on me. And it's just like this. And that's what we do. And the fact is that everybody listening here right now, you are all paradoxes. You're in a body that begins and ends. You're in a body that has a certain form and certain appearances. And then there's this part of me inside here that's observing all of this ghost in this machine that has no beginnings and no ends, no form, no appearance. We're walking, talking, breathing paradoxes at all times. We have to be able to live with both of these ideas at the same time. You can either decide to be connected to Source or not. That's your free will. If you make the choice not to be, you take the consequences of all of that, which involves so many of the things that we would like not to have. But at any given moment, you can say, I choose to vibrate to Source energy. I choose to be in harmony in concert with my Source. And once you do that, then everything that you were intended to be unfolds for you. All right, I call this the connection. And I want to read this, and it'll be the only reading that I'll do. And I call this a portrait of a person connected to the field of intention. And the quotation that I had for Abraham Maslow was this: self-actualizing people, he said, must be what they can be. They must be what they can be. That's the distinction between those who are connected and those who are not. That whatever it is that I can be, I feel internally that I must create it. A person who lives in a state of unity with the source of all life doesn't look any different from ordinary folks. These people don't wear a halo or dress in special garments that announce their godlike qualities. But when you notice that they go through life as the lucky ones who seem to get all the breaks, and when you begin to talk to them, you realize how distinctive they are compared to people living at ordinary levels of awareness. Spend a few moments in conversation with these people who are connected to the power of intention, and you see how unique they really are. These people, whom I call connectors, to signify their harmonious connection with the field of intention, are individuals who have made themselves available for success. It's impossible to get them to be pessimistic about achieving what they desire in their lives. They speak from an inner conviction that communicates their profound and simple knowing that the universal source supplies everything. They don't say, with my luck, things won't work out. Instead, you're much more likely to hear something like, I intend to create this, and I know it will work out. It's almost as if they're in a different world, a world in which they can't hear the reasons why things won't work out. If you engage them in conversation about this idea, they'll simply say, I refuse to think about what can't happen because I'll attract exactly what I think about. So I only think about what I know will happen. It doesn't matter to them what's happened before. They don't relate to the concepts of failure or it's impossible. They've made themselves available for success, and they know and trust in an invisible force that's all providing. Connectors don't place their thoughts on what they don't want because, as they'll tell you, the source of all can only respond with what it is, and what it is infinite supply. It can't relate to scarcity or things not working out because it's none of these things. If I say to the source of all things, it probably won't work out, I'll receive back from it precisely what I sent to it. So I know better than to think anything other than what my source is. To the average person who has fears about the future, they'll tell their connector friend to do a reality check and look realistically at the world they live in. But connectors aren't distracted from their inner knowing. They'll tell you, if you choose to listen, that this is a universe of energy and attraction, and that the reason so many people live lives of fear and scarcity is because they rely on their ego to fulfill their desires. It's simple, they'll tell you. Just reconnect to your source and be like your source, and your intentions will match up perfectly with the all-providing source. Keep your thoughts on what you intend to create. Stay consistently matched up with the field of intention, and then watch for the clues that what you're summoning from the all-creative source is arriving in your life. To a connector, there are simply no accidents. They perceive seemingly insignificant events as being orchestrated in perfect harmony. They believe in synchronicity and aren't surprised when the perfect person for a situation appears, or when someone they've been thinking about calls out of the blue, or when a book arrives unexpectedly in the mail, giving them the information they needed, or when the money to finance a project they've been intending mysteriously just shows up. Connectors won't attempt to win you over to their point of view with debates. They know better than to place a lot of energy on arguing or being frustrated, because that attracts argumentation and frustration into their lives. They accept the idea that there are no accidents in a universe that has an invisible force of energy as its source that continuously creates and provides an infinite supply to all who wish to partake of it. They'll tell you, plain and simple, if you inquire. All you have to do to tap into the power of intention is to be in a perfect match with the source of everything. And I'm choosing to be as closely aligned to that source as I can. To connectors, everything that shows up in their life is there because the power of intention intended it there. So they're always in a state of gratitude. They feel thankful for everything, even things that might seem to be obstacles. And they know in their heart that somewhere an opportunity exists in the setback, and that is what they look for in everything that shows up in their life. They commune with the source in a state of reverent gratitude for all that's present in their lives, knowing that this empowers their intention to manifest precisely what they need. That's such a powerful thing, especially when people pray. You don't go to the source, ever assuming that something is missing, unless you want a confirmation of your belief in shortages. It's a very distinct difference in how we pray. You don't pray to be healed of an illness. You pray healing. You connect at a healing level with that which is all well-being. Connectors describe themselves as living in a state of appreciation and bewilderment. You're unlikely to hear them complain about anything. They aren't fault finders. Connectors appreciate the world and everything in it. They have a consciousness of the oneness, and therefore they make no distinctions such as them or those other people. To a connector, it's all us. If you could observe their inner world, you'd discover that they're hurt by pain inflicted on others. They don't have the concept of enemies, since they know that all of us emanate from the same divine source. They enjoy the differences in the appearance and customs of others rather than disliking, criticizing, or feeling threatened by them. In their heart, connectors feel an affinity to all of life, as well as to the source of all of life. It's because of this connecting link that connectors are so adept at attracting into their lives the cooperation and assistance of others in fulfilling their own intentions. The very fact of feeling connected means that in the connectors' minds, there's no one on this planet who they're not joined up with in a spiritual sense. Connectors aren't surprised when synchronicity or coincidence brings them the fruits of their intentions. They know in their hearts that those seemingly miraculous happenings were brought into their immediate life space because they were already connected to them. Ask connectors about it, and they'll tell you, of course, it's the law of attraction at work. Stay tuned vibrationally to the source of all life that intended you, and everyone else here and all of the powers of that field of intention will cooperate with you to bring into your life what you desire. They know that this is how the universe works. Others may insist that connectors are just plain lucky, but the people who enjoy the power of intention know otherwise. They know that they can negotiate the presence of anything they place their attention on as long as they stay consistent with the 7 faces of intention, which I'll be speaking about here in this program. They understand how the universe works, and they stay blissfully in tune with it. Rather than challenging or finding fault with it, they'll tell you that we're all part of a dynamic energy system. Energy that moves faster, they explain, dissolves and nullifies slower moving energy. These people choose to be in harmony with the invisible spiritual energy. They've trained their thoughts to move at the levels of the higher vibrations, and consequently, they're able to deflect lower and slower vibrations. Connectors have an uplifting effect when they come into contact with people who are living in lower energy levels. Their peacefulness causes others to feel calm and assured, and they radiate as energy of serenity and peace. Rather than trying to persuade you to think like they do, they're convincing through the energy they exude. People feel loved by connectors because they're merged with the source of all life, which is love. Connectors tell you without hesitation that they choose to feel good regardless of what's going on around them or how others might judge them. They know that feeling bad is a choice and that it isn't useful for correcting unpleasant situations in the world. So they use their emotions as a guidance system to determine how attuned they are to the power of intention. If they feel bad in any way, they use this as an indication that it's time to change their energy level so that it matches up with the peaceful, loving energy of the source. They'll repeat to themselves, I want to feel good. And they'll bring their thoughts into harmony with this desire. I want to feel good. 5 very, very important words that you'll practice a lot after listening to this program. If you ask them why they don't feel bad when so many bad things are happening in the world, they'll remind you that the world of spirit from which all is intended works in peace, love, harmony, kindness, and abundance. And that is where I choose to reside within myself. My feeling bad will only ensure that I attract more of feeling bad into my life. Connectors simply don't allow their well-being to be contingent on anything external to themselves. Not the weather, not the wars someplace on the globe, not the political landscape, not the economy, and certainly not anyone else's decision to be in low energy. They work with the field of intention, emulating what they know is the creative source of all. They live in harmony with spirit, never seeing themselves as separate. This awareness is key to their seeing the power of intention at work on a daily basis. They can see what it is that they intend to manifest into their lives as if it already had materialized, and for them, because it's so real in their thoughts, it is their reality. You'll see if you follow them closely enough that they're exceptional at realizing the fruits of their intentions. Connector people are exceptionally generous. They take great pleasure in giving. Others may wonder how they ever accumulate anything for themselves, yet their lives are filled with abundance, and they seem to lack nothing that they desire. The secret to the power of intention, they'll tell you, is in thinking and acting the same as the all-providing source from which all originates. It's always providing, and I choose to be a provider too. The more I give of myself and all that flows to me, the more I see flowing back to me. Connectors are highly inspired people. Their level of energy is exceptionally high. They bring a peaceful countenance to the presence of chaos and disharmony and convert the lower energies to the higher energy of peace. They'll even go so far as to tell you that imbalances in the earth, such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and extreme weather patterns, are the result of a collective imbalance in human consciousness. They view themselves as one with the planet and feel a responsibility to stay in balanced harmony with the field of intention to help to stabilize and harmonize the forces of the universe that can get out of balance when we live from excessive ego. They'll tell you that all thoughts, feelings, and emotions are vibrations, and that the frequency of these vibrations can create disturbances, not only in ourselves, but in everything that's made of the same material. Doesn't that make sense? We're all made of the same stuff. And when we're out of balance, it's out of balance. As you observe these connectors, you'll notice that they don't dwell on illness and disease. They move through their life as if their body is in perfect health. They know that there are many possible outcomes for any given condition, even for a condition that may seem to others to be impossible to overcome. Ask them about their healing capabilities, and they'll say, I'm already healed, and I think and feel from only this perspective. Connectors live their lives matched up vibrationally to the field of intention. To them, everything is energy. The connectors live through higher and faster energy that allows them to access their intuitive powers readily. By staying so connected to source energy, they're able to activate their intuition and have insight into what is possible and how to go about achieving it. Their inner knowing allows them to be infinitely patient, and they're never dissatisfied with the speed or the manner in which their intentions are manifesting. Connectors are exceptionally kind and loving people. They know that harmonizing with source energy is replicating the kindness from which they originated. They're always grateful for what comes to them, and they know that kindness toward all of life and our planet is how to display gratitude. By being kind, others want to return the favor and become allies in helping them to achieve their intentions. You'll also notice how connectors see the beauty in our world. They're always finding something to appreciate. They're inquisitive about life, and they're attracted to every manner of activity. They find something to enjoy in all fields of human and creative endeavors, and are always expanding their own horizons. This openness to everything and all possibilities, and this quality of always expanding, characterizes their proficiency in manifesting their desires. They never say no to the universe. Whatever life sends them, they say, thank you. What can I learn, and how can I grow from what I'm receiving? They refuse to judge anyone or anything that the source offers them, and this always expanding attitude is what ultimately matches them up with source energy and opens up their life to receiving all that the source is willing to provide. This makes them totally receptive to the abundance that's always ceaselessly flowing. These highly realized people think from the end, experiencing what they wish to intend before it shows up in material form. They use their feelings as a gauge to determine if they're synchronized with the power of intention. If they feel good, they know that they're in vibrational harmony with Source. If they feel bad, they use this indicator to adjust to higher energy levels. And finally, they act on these thoughts of intention and good feelings as if all that they desired were already here. If you ask them what you can do to make your desires come true, they'll unhesitatingly advise you to change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. I urge you to replicate their inner world and rejoice in the infinitely magnificent power of intention. It works. I guarantee it.